Alright guys, that's Scrappy again today. Hope you're all doing good and enjoying your day so far. Shotzzy continues to absolutely fry leading into the World Championship, getting some good practice in against the Stallions, or otherwise, depending on your perspective. Maybe the level of competition there isn't what they need to see, but nonetheless, Shotzzy, despite a difficult season, it's still the movement king when it potentially really matters towards the end of the year. He's turned up over the last few weeks. Can he continue that momentum into champs? Scump talks about what their plan is to potentially be there in Kitchener for the World Championship, because that OpTic team is potentially peaking at a rather good time. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. First of all, I wanted to start here. The Burger King of the stage, unfortunately, is officially felony. I think there was maybe Capstor was down at a 57 rated, but no, FeLo was, unfortunately for him, a little bit lower than that. Obviously, it's been a difficult season for this entire franchise. Gotaga was optimistic at the start of the year. They signed a roster which was effectively the New York Subliners World Championship winning roster from a couple of years ago. Kismet, Skyz, Priester, Lins. That was the team of four. I mean, it's funny to look back on really because it's like, oh, that's just the champs team, but with another French superstar. But of course, HyDra is one thing. You know, Lins is a very different prospect. And I'm not to say that Lins is necessarily a player that can't reach certain levels. I still think that there's some potential in there that we haven't maybe yet seen, at least in terms of consistency. But they got rid of him. Kismet stayed. Kismet, on some levels, got the keys. And look, I think Kiz has been pretty solid this season. He's certainly been their best player of the year. But also, I don't know who's been making the decisions over there as well. You know, have they given Kiz the keys to build the rest of the roster around him? In which case, you know, he's played reasonably well, but it's not like he's built a great roster. Or whoever's made these decisions, right? Because are they any better now than they were at the start of the season? At least at the start of the year, with their questionable team, with Priester, Skyz, Lins, whatever. Like, they were at least losing a lot of game 5s, so they would go game 5 and lose. Whereas this time, since then anyway, if anything, it's got even worse. I think Johnny as well has played pretty reasonably. Lunas has turned up a little bit towards the end of the year, but, you know, still not been great. And then FeLo's numbers have been, yeah, a challenge for sure. He, you know, didn't really have a positive series until rather recently at the major. So it's tough for FeLo. Obviously, he's got another opportunity back in the league, and I think it was deserved. The question is, I guess, from now on, what happens next? Because FeLo got a couple of opportunities, of course, in challenges, and that will not change because he's excellent at building up talent. But, you know, when the CDL offer, let's say, came into effect, I also really wonder what this team is going to look like going into the World Cup, right? Because I don't think they necessarily have to keep the same team. It's certainly not going to go to the World Cup as Los Angeles Guerrillas Gentlemates, and they're certainly not going to be called that next year either. They will just be called Gentlemates, and they'll finally be able to get rid of this branding in the middle, which has been cursing us in COD for many a year at this point. They missed the deadline last year, I think, to fully change it, but this year that will be officially gone. Maybe at that point the curse will be lifted for the Los Angeles Guerrillas. The Gentlemates will go to the World Cup. I mean, last year they went with, you know, Cobra and obviously a French player. And they had an interesting team, I think, you know, Bance and those other guys as well, with Harry, was it Denza, right? That might have been the team before they put together. This year, what are they going to do? Are they going to take these guys? Pretty doubtful, right? You want to be building a bit for next year. Maybe you throw Lins back in, give him another opportunity. You know, I think they're going to be making some pretty wholesale changes to this franchise in the very near future. And it was their control that was probably the big struggle point of the stage, which is difficult because at the start of the season, that was actually the one game mode that they could win. Everything else was, yeah, a real struggle, and that hasn't really changed. Falcons also placed top 8, as did Gentlemates this tournament. Clay talks about it, right, having played a season as a coach, reflecting back on my first season, there's tons I would have done different. It's been an incredible learning experience for me, taught me a new non-player perspective on how a team functions. Disappointed with the results, disappointed in myself for not preparing the team with the appropriate tools to perform in-game on a consistent basis. Sorry to the Falcons fans, we're taking a bit of a time off before we start preparations for EWC, and, you know, I wonder if there's any kind of roster change discussions in this little period they're taking off. The one silver lining in the industry, you've always got another opportunity. So, you know, it is very interesting. He talks about getting familiar with Saudi culture, interacting with the passionate fans, promise you will do better. Of course, for Clay, you know, he did that tweet, didn't he? It was like, yeah, this roster, I've cooked up multiple rosters in my career. And I was like, okay, let's just see how this goes, Clay. And I was, you know, cautiously optimistic when Clay tweeted that, because he obviously had brought in Nasties and Priester at that point, and I wasn't convinced, right? Nobody was really that convinced, but Clay was pretty convinced, and he was so convinced that he decided to obviously tweet about it publicly. Of course, that all didn't really go to plan, did it? In the end, as the season rolls to a conclusion, they don't make the World Championship. The Air duo not looking especially good, but For the EWC, it's a potentially different story. And I think for Clay, he's not wrong that for the start of the season, certainly your first season coaching, I know that Clay will probably feel that in his last couple of years competing, he was effectively coaching as well, given that he was so much older than the rest of the guys. But I think it is definitely a different story when you're actually coaching a team for the first time. And I'm sure that many other coaches, you know, the likes of Sender maybe would probably say that as a coach, they've got substantially better over time from where they were as a coach in the first year, because it's still a relatively, certainly in COD Esports, it's a relatively new thing, really. Like a decade ago, coaches didn't exist. You had Pomage on the main stage with a headset on, right? Like it was a very different story back then, or Mr. X was just standing up talking trash all game. Nowadays, you know, proper coaches are a thing, and I think coaches can make a difference. Certainly, well, Clay will feel that way. If you didn't feel that way, then what's the point in doing the job, I suppose? Now, plenty of other things to get into as well. Renkor's had a great season. I think there's really no doubt that he's going to be Rookie of the Year this season. Super also kind of put himself in the conversation at the end, but I think Renkor, certainly at Major 4, was, you know, stronger. This guy has been out of control, and it's really impressive to see, honestly, that that Spanish team has finally put together a roster that's actually capable of being competitive. Now, can they win? Maybe that's a bit of a stretch. Of course, we talked about it yesterday, day before, whether a guy like Snoopy could be a consideration if they really want to try and up the firepower a little bit more. Huke has had a great season as well, I think, despite the fact that OpTic have been in a bit of a disaster. He has at least made a Sunday, or, you know, placed top 4 at every single COD that he's played in, which is pretty amazing, really. Like, if you sign Huke, you're basically guaranteed a Sunday at some point, which is, no, it's not nothing crazy, but it is still pretty impressive, because many other players have not had that level of consistency in their career, certainly not for playing as long as he has. And his KD this season has actually been very strong as well. Not quite strong enough to be in the top 5 of the season. These are those top 5 players of the season. Look, going into the year, who would you have predicted to be in the top 5? I'd have probably thought that Dashy might have found himself in there. But, you know, he's had not a bad season. I think Dashy's actually been pretty solid. It's just OpTic overall have had a bad season, and the numbers as a result aren't great, and also his playstyle nowadays is slightly different to what it used to be as well. But Cellium's at a 1.17, then you've got the duo on the Thieves, 1.14, 1.13 for Scrap and HyDra, JoeDeceives 0 to 1.08, and Simp at a 1.08 as well. But of course, you know, the pure KD, you can debate on how much it really matters, because, you know, Nicolina in the reply says, look, not all KDs are made equally. This is engagements per 10, so effectively this is pace. Now, you know, and this kind of adds up to things like Slayer rating and BP rating and other things, but of course, objective work is also relevant. But it is interesting just to note that HyDra and Scrap, as you might well expect, are right up there top of the league in terms of fastest players, and they've got the best KD, whereas Cellium in the respawns is one of the slowest players in the entire league. I mean, he comes out at 56th, which is pretty crazy. I mean, I don't know how many players have had in the league this year. Obviously 48 starters, but we've had loads of other players. You know, Falcons had 1 million players. So, you know, but it's certainly bottom percentile of the players in the league in terms of pace, but the highest KD. But also that's what FaZe, how they want him to play. And also they've won a couple of events this season, so it's not like they should necessarily be changing that one. This is the full plan for the World Championship. So we looked at the venue a little while ago. Of course, it's up there in Kitchener. I think it's technically Ontario, but of course it's nearby Waterloo. There's an airport at Waterloo that people can fly into, but I think internationally people will be flying into mainly Pearson, right, in Toronto, and then probably driving up. Now, the fortunate thing for this is that the airport is to the west of the city, so of Toronto. So if you go straight from the airport to Kitchener, you're probably not going to encounter too much traffic, and it should be reasonable in terms of time frame to get there. Still not ideal, but it's not like you've got to necessarily come through all the very challenging Toronto traffic. But look, I'm sure the venue is going to be spectacular. The big question has really been that for a 4-day event, having it in a city where there are things to do is quite important, which is, you know, why the big debate has been around the venue choice. Not the venue choice precisely, but purely the location of the tournament. The venue, I'm sure, is going to be amazing, because it's very similar, I think, if you look at the venue, it's very similar, the auditorium, basically, out there in Kitchener, because there's like one stadium that they could do this out in that city, and that's where it's going to be. It's very similar to what we had for Champs last year, right, and what we went to for Major 2 in Dallas. Again, the Credit Union of Texas Arena or whatever, right? It's very similar in concept, like ice hockey, right? It's kind of, I don't know, that's what it feels like to me anyway. So you've got the general admission seating round here, you've got the Bell fan zone at the front. The stage is going to be a centre stage. You've got the broadcast stuff here, floor seating here, the players are going to enter this way. And I'm sure it's going to be amazing, right? Like, the way that they're going to sell at this venue is going to be sensational. You've got sweets around the outside as well. So, yeah, excited to see what they cook up for this event. Scump, of course, was talking about it, though, because, you know, it's a bit of a debate for the OpTic guys. Do they go? Do they bring the watch party to the World Championship? Do they do it from home? You know, there's a couple of things they've got to figure out. Scump says that right now, yeah, it's looking like they are going to go for the World Championship. I do wonder whether, if their team was still bad, would they bother? Is that relevant to their decision? Like, if OpTic didn't make it to champs, they wouldn't be going, would they? But they have made it to champs, and they've looked a bit more promising lately. So maybe they, you know, maybe that's part of the decision. I don't know. But yeah, Scump talks about that. But the other clips I wanted to share here, of course, were on Shotzzy, because he was back in some scrims, playing with and sometimes against the Stallions guys, putting in serious work. Now, I mean, some of these clips he puts on are just an absolute highlight reel. And although Shotzzy's had a difficult season, right? Like, he's not had a great year by his standards. He's been all-star, MVP, whatever, for the last few years in a row. He's still Shotzzy, and I think he's turned up pretty good at the end of the season. There's definitely been some difficult stints for him this year, but like, he's still Shotzzy, and he's still got the capability to do stuff like this. So a couple of clips to share for you guys, and then we'll close out the video.
Are we going to champs? JW, we are still figuring that out. Right now, it's looking like yes, though. Right now, it's looking like yes. We have a lot to figure out logistically. We gotta figure out if we're going to Toronto and we're doing a watch party from an Airbnb in Toronto, or we got to figure out if we're actually going to stay in Kitchener and do it from the event. So we're still trying to figure out what we want to do collectively. But right now, it's looking like we're going to be there. It's just we're trying to figure out what's going on and what we want to do.
I'm bad, Not bad, done. I'm making the time.
Oh!
What the fuck was that? I saw a fucking fish, yeah.
One's out, outer palm right now, GG. You're missing one, no? That's three.
Who's got me?
Mind you, cat. One's outer palm and you had two.
You're my front right now.
I'm telling you,
GG's outer palm. GG's outer palm. GG's outer palm.
GG's done.
That's shit,
bro.
Should be on the back.
Two spawn out. Don't look at the back. Two spawn there.
Oh, we're looking at the back.
I'm missing top cat, last kid.
This kind of pro grid has been going around the esports world over the last few weeks, and we're going to fill this in over the coming days. So anyway, great mechanics, average mechanics, bad mechanics, and then game sense on the left-hand side. So the best of the bunch, Jimbo, right? You know, like, because, well, we know that name. If you guys are new, then look up the story of Jimbo. Interesting character. Great mechanics, great game sense. You're talking someone like HyDra. Next up, we've got great game sense, and then maybe average mechanics, right? Like, I don't know, first to mind was someone like Kenny, potentially. But we'll see what the boys vote in the replies. Feels like someone who's going to be a more, you know, veteran, maybe in-game leadership type AR. You know, maybe someone like Slasher as well. Maybe even Ghosty would potentially be a good one. But that kind of seems like a reasonable character to me. I feel like it's interesting, right? Because someone like Slasher, like his gunny, he would probably be in this category a few years ago. You know, I'm not saying Slasher can still shoot straight, but I think compared to like the average player, Slasher's mechanics are probably more average now, whereas they used to be great, maybe you would argue. So depends what you want to say. Maybe you could argue the same thing for Kenny as well. But I guess we're talking right now where the players sit. That's my opinion. Intrigue to your thoughts. As always, and all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.